In this final section of Chapter 7, we will look at language development. Three topics that we will cover are vocabulary, grammar, and metalinguistic awareness, reading, and then bilingualism. Just one slide per topic, so it should be relatively quick. Let's start with vocabulary, grammar, and metalinguistic awareness. So in middle and late childhood, there are some changes in the way a child's mental vocabulary is organized. They start to organize their words by parts of speech. So if you do a little test with preschoolers versus elementary school children, and you do a test where you give them a word and ask them to say the first word that comes to mind, some typical results are that for a preschooler, if I was to say the word dog, they might say something like barks or, I don't know, licks or something like that. If I say the word cat, or no, not cat, excuse me. If I say the word eat, they might say something like lunch or food. And this seems to make sense. But if I ask elementary school children or older adolescents, what you find is that when you say something like the word dog, the first word that comes to let's say a 7-year-old's mind would be something like cat or horse. That is, instead of barks or licks, what they're doing is saying another noun. You've said the word dog, they come back with a noun as the first word to pop into their head. When you say eat, instead of something like lunch or food, they'll come back with another verb. So you say eat, they might say drink. So this is evidence that they're categorizing by parts of speech, which is a more complex form of categorizing. And this is true of adolescent or adult brains. Most of you, would respond to the word dog with another noun, or respond to the word eat with another verb. There are advances in their grammar skills and as far as forming sentences. I'm not going to get into it. They also demonstrate some metalinguistic awareness, which is knowledge about language. So elementary school children can understand what a preposition is. They can discuss the sounds of a language. They're very sensitive to things like rhyming words and homophones and things like that. Understanding that what makes a word rhyme, and understanding that two words can sound the same even though they mean something different. Okay, that's enough. And second topic is reading. I just want to talk about two major approaches. These approaches were argued about for some time in the past. The first one is whole language approach, and this says that reading instruction should parallel our language learning. If you think about how we learn language, we just are exposed to a whole bunch of speech, and our brains, categorize the speech we hear and make sense of it, and eventually we start to talk and one word and then two words and three words and then full sentences without any direct instruction. We just learn from being exposed to language. So the whole language approach says, well, this should be true of reading as well. That if we just expose children to a lot of written material, just like we're exposed to verbal material when we learn language, learn to speak, if we're exposed to written material and just seeing words and seeing, and having books read to us and things like that, that we should be able to just pick up reading on our own. So this approach emphasizes listening to stories and writing as the way to build to reading. Children are made to recognize entire words and sentences, and just to use the context of the words that are given in a text to guess their meaning. So if they see the word dog and there's a picture of a dog in the storybook, I mean, they can figure out that DOG, that configuration of symbols, probably represents the word dog. All right. Anyway, that's the whole language approach. The phonics approach is kind of a bottom-up approach, that you start with the letters of the alphabet and you talk about the sounds of each letter, and so the phonics approach is building up from individual letters and sounds and then combining them and sounding out words. We call this a bottom-up approach. The whole language approach we call a top-down approach. You start with whole words and sentences, and hopefully the child learns to break them, learn what individual letters and sounds are. Anyways, it's what we find is that this was a debate in the past, but now good teachers of reading combine both approaches. You definitely need some phonics for a child to learn to read properly, but you cannot only do phonics. Well, children tend to not understand the purpose of learning how to sound out letters and words. They need to have a lot of written material as well, like having books read to them and trying to read things on their own, and then they understand the purpose of language. So combining the two approaches is the best way to go about teaching reading. Our final topic is second language learning. As it says here, bilingualism has a positive effect on children's cognitive development. What they found was that when children learn a second language early in life, they can actually learn the second language, or learn two languages, I should say, in the same time it takes to learn one language. So children that start learning a second language, very early in their life, let's say even from the first year, where they have people that speak a second language in the household, we call those natural bilinguals. They learn two languages at the same time. They're exposed to two languages right from birth. When that happens, that child develops skill and efficiency in both languages at the same rate as a child learning one language. This is one of the great discoveries in research on bilingualism and second language learning, was that you could learn two languages in the same time it takes to learn one. And this was obviously a major discovery. One of the reasons people used to not teach a second language early in life was that it would harm their learning of their home language, of their main language. And we found that not to be true. As it says here, though, besides the fact that you can learn two languages in the same time, you can learn one. I mean, it also has added benefits. You see a whole list here: attention control, concept formation, analytical reasoning, inhibition, cognitive flexibility, complexity, monitoring. There's a whole list here of added benefits to learning a second language early in life. It kind of opens the brain up in different ways, and has these added benefits. For instance, cognitive flexibility means that you can switch from one task to another very easily. Well, somebody that has two languages in their head does that routinely, so no wonder they would develop a cognition that's more flexible. All right. Anyways, so many benefits of second language learning. One negative is called subtractive bilingualism. This occurs occasionally when immigrant children who speak their native language at home, they go to school, they learn the majority language. So let's say an immigrant coming to the United States, they speak one language at home, they go to school, learn English, and then they may actually become ashamed of their home language. The majority culture speaks English. They've learned the new language, English, in their culture. And so some children will kind of push away their original language, their home, what called their home language that they began life with, because they want to fit into the new culture. And when this happens, we call it subtractive bilingualism. They can end up as monolingual speakers of English and actually forget and lose their skill in their native language. Okay. I'm going to just add a few points here about second language learning. There are sensitive periods for learning a second language, but it actually varies for different aspects of the language. So when we talk about sensitive period, we talk about when you are at when an optimal time exists for learning something is a second sensitive period. For learning a second language, there are different aspects of the second language can be learned best at different times. So I'll just give you an example of what I mean here. For adolescents and adults, new vocabulary of a second language is easier to learn than new sounds or new grammar. But for younger children in childhood, new sounds and new grammar are easier to learn than new vocabulary. So, we have a sensitive period where you can learn the sounds and the grammar of a language much easier the younger you are. This is because, if you think about it, this is what you're doing as you learn your first language. Your brain's attuned to analyzing the speech that you hear and learning the syntax and the grammar naturally. As I've mentioned before, we don't teach our young children that. They just pick it up on their own. They learn how to form sentences. So earlier on, we can learn sounds and grammar. Later on, vocabulary becomes easier. Why is that? Well, perhaps vocabulary benefits from having a knowledge base. You learn the meaning of new words, and it's easier if you know other similar words in that same area. So we find that the sensitive period for vocabulary is actually later. Okay. Also, adults learn a second language overall faster than children, which surprises some people. But their mastery is never going to be as high as a child's. So we can actually learn things faster when we're older. Once again, we have more of a base knowledge, but we don't learn it as efficiently. And children will become better at the second language in the long run. So it is better to learn it in childhood. Okay. And that will conclude this final section of chapter 7.